Feeling a little unsettled and stressed with the way things are in our world? Experience the peace of Jesus with Finding Peace, our 5-day devotional. Visit purposely.com to sign up.
Hi, this is Steve, and I hope you enjoy our second conversation with Mikhail Pavenko. The first one was back on episode 26, if you want to hear that. But I also should let you know we're going to be talking about things that happen in war. So this episode is not appropriate for small children, and listener discretion is advised.
Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hi, welcome to Shaken. I'm Steve Sunshine. If life has you asking God questions like, where are you? Or why did you let this happen to me? You're in the right place. Shaken is full of honest conversations and stories for real hope, not pat answers. We look at suffering pretty unflinchingly, but we also point you to Jesus, the source of hope and comfort in any circumstance.
He said, Mikhail, we were on an assignment and basically we became surrounded. The weather was clear, meaning that the Russian drones could see us very well. We had no food, no ammunition, running low on water. He said, Mikhail, I prayed to God best as I could, being Orthodox. I said, God, if you're there, please save us. Those were my words. He said, Mikhail, next morning, this thick fog rolled in out of nowhere.
Oh, wow.
And he says, I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. And he said, that means the Russian drones couldn't see us too. So he said, we made our exit under that cover of that fog. And he says, you know what? I know God exists.
That's Mikhail Pavenko, who's been serving the Ukrainian military as a chaplain. Mikhail has been on the front lines of that devastating war and has seen the horrors and the miracles up close as he works to point those in the line of fire to Jesus. So welcome back, Mikhail. I'm really glad to have you. If you haven't had the chance to listen to episode 26, I'd recommend doing that. You don't have to do it now. Maybe listen after to this one. That was the first time we talked about Mikhail and what he's doing in Ukraine. But if you could just give us a synopsis of what you're doing and why you're doing it, for anybody who hasn't listened to episode 26 yet, I think that would be a good place to start.
Hey, Steve, good morning. Good to be with you. Really glad to be back here and to have a good conversation with you. My name is Mikhail Pavenko. I was born in Ukraine. I grew up a large portion of my life in Tacoma, Washington, Pierce County. And for the last 10 years, I've been living here in Clark County, Washington, a little south of Tacoma. To answer to your question, why I do what I do as a chaplain, I think there's a verse in the Bible that really kind of hits it home. Proverbs 24:11, verse 11 and verse 12 says these things. It says these words: "Save those who are being led to their death. Rescue those who are about to be killed." That's really, I think that's really a good motto for the chaplaincy in Ukraine. If you asked, I think 100 chaplains what their motto is, I think majority of them would point to that verse. That's really what we do, right? We minister to the soldiers and the civilians and the wounded in basically a place of combat and place of war. That's what we do. Yeah.
So you were there. We talked, I think it was about 6 months before, or before now. That was back in November, I believe. We're recording this in May of 25. What's changed since then? How are things different?
Yeah, so my first trip to Ukraine was in 2015 as a volunteer. Then later on I became a chaplain shortly later on. And since 2020 I've been doing about 2 trips per year. One beginning of the year, one towards the later part of the year. To answer what changed, I would say the war has gotten more deadlier.
It has.
Yeah, with the introduction of suicide drones from both sides. Unfortunately, Russians have a large amount of these drones that are these personal drones that carry a small warhead. They'll take out a pickup or a civilian or an individual really with ease. And these drones are becoming more accurate. They have the ability to fly a lot deeper into the opposing territory, unfortunately. So this last trip was definitely an eye opener for me in drone warfare, and also just in God's mercy to be had every chance to be not here anymore, but due to God's mercy, we're here, and that's really how the war's changed. It's gotten more deadlier. It's gotten more barbaric, especially in the last 3-4 months. The Russians have really stepped up their attacks on civilians. I'll just quickly bring up this scenario we had in the city of Sumy on Palm Sunday, April 13th in Ukraine. It was a Sunday morning at 10:15 a.m. Russians launched a ballistic missile on the center of the city. The first missile hit at 10:15, and the second missile hit at 10:17, about a few hundred feet apart from each other. Injured over 130 people, killed 35 people, killed actually an entire family that was going to church on Palm Sunday. Just to give you an example, Steve, these missiles, they traveled at 2 kilometers per second, 6 times the speed of sound. These are hypersonic missiles. The first missile flew, what I was told, only 45 seconds from its launch point in Russia to its target in Ukraine. They hit a kind of this Sumy State University Congress Hall, kind of conference center. And that was the first missile. So the war has gotten more barbaric. A lot more civilians are getting killed, unfortunately. A large portion of Russia's attacks are actually well beyond the front lines. They're in cities, far cities, Odessa, Kyiv, center of Ukraine. That's the unfortunate reality here.
Can you think of somebody that you've run into who has shown surprising courage?
You know what? In Ukraine, Steve, that is found every single day. I've met so many people in my missions as a chaplain in the front lines. Sometimes I'll hear this saying, "Oh, Mikhail, you're a hero." Well, no, I'm not a hero. And I'm just doing what my calling is. To me, the heroes are the people that had the chance to leave, right? People with a lot of kids. And in Ukraine, there's a law. If you have 3 children, you can bypass, be mobilized, right? You're considered a father of a large family. And to me, the heroes are people of courage, are the pastors that are still serving and having their churches, be 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers from the Russians. I have 3 uncles in Ukraine who are all pastors of large churches. And daily their cities are getting bombed, but they're still serving their churches, the troops, the wounded in the hospitals, the community. And those to me are the people that are shown true courage, right? The church really, one of the things I really have learned about the Christian faith, the Christian religion, I don't even like the word religion, is Christianity. It's very practical. It's we're the hands and feet, right? It's a lot more than praying in tongues or casting out demons, healing the sick. Those are all biblical things. But Christianity, it's a practical faith. And those people that are doing the little things, which amount to big things, those people really encourage me to do what I do.
Yeah, I can imagine. So. There's an old cliche that says there are no atheists in foxholes. Have you seen people coming to Christ?
Yeah,
Because of of everything that's happening?
absolutely. I'm going to tell you something that is very, very honest. As chaplains, we pray for people, and these are very, very simple prayers, right? I teach my soldiers, prayer it's a really, really simple conversation with God, you and God, that's it. It doesn't need to be anything extremely over the top, right? Anything rich words or some fancy vocab. I've prayed for a lot of soldiers over the last 10 years serving in Ukraine. I only had one soldier tell me this, Mikhail, thanks but no thanks, right? And it turns out he was actually a Muslim guy. That's it. And I still gave him a Bible, and we had a great conversation. And out of respect to him, I said, absolutely, man. I thank you for your service. Gave him a hug, and we had a good conversation. Later on, we kind of became, I guess buddies, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, later on we actually did end up praying for him after a conversation. One of the things that I really really enjoy, Steve, is doing hospital work in Ukraine. I think if I lived in Ukraine, I'd probably do two things. I'd be a chaplain in an artillery unit, or I would serve in the hospitals. And for me, hospitals are a special place. When I go to the hospitals, it's a different environment, right? People that are injured, for the most part, or going through rehab, and you can have a very very clear conversation with them. Does that make sense? One on
Yeah.
one. They're very vulnerable conversations, and I had a conversation with an older gentleman this time, and he told me how he knows that God exists. I took a picture with him, and he said these things. He said, Mikhail, we were on an assignment, and basically we became surrounded in a small village. We had a very, very limited means of egress, means of exit out of this village. The weather was clear, meaning that the Russian drones could see us very well, so it was extremely risky for us to walk out. And a few days later, we're practically surrounded. We had no food, no ammunition, running low on water. And he said, I was responsible for, for a set amount of individuals under me. He said these things. He said, Mikhail, I I prayed to God best as I could, being an Orthodox. I said, God, if you're there, please save us. Those were my words. He said, Mikhail, next morning, this thick fog rolled in out of
Oh,
nowhere.
wow.
And he says, I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. And he said, that means the Russian drones couldn't see us too. So he said, we made our exit under that cover of that fog. And he says, you know what? I know God exists. That was his testimony to me. So that's just a little snippet of the things that I hear from my troops.
Yeah. Yeah, that's remarkable. How have do you see the troops encouraging each other, like mentoring each other and
Yeah,
spiritually?
yeah, that's another great question. So this war is entering its fourth year of a full-scale invasion, right? I
Hmm.
mean, this is the intensity of this war is something we haven't seen since World War II, with the amount of artillery, other types of weaponry that is being employed. So this war has taken a massive toll on the human body, the human mind. What really motivates the people of Ukraine is this. For one, they're motivated, they're defending their home, their children, their families, their churches. So that motivation is there. But physically, the people are definitely getting tired. And I would say, as far as with regards to motivation, that really depends on the unit and the commander, right? Each unit has its own culture. I've seen some units that were, in my opinion, the command could do a little better, and some units where command is just they are on top of it. They are professionals. There's really a feeling of family in that unit, right? Really a lot of cohesiveness, and they really operate as a unit. But the soldiers absolutely motivate, encourage each other, and that's really also where the chaplains come in, right? We lift up their spirits, and not only that, Steve, we take care of their issue. We take care of their issues back home. I can tell you a scenario we had where a commander, a soldier, this gentleman's in charge of a unit, and his wife called and says, "Hey, my roof's leaking, and the dishwasher broke at home, right? And he's got 5 kids, West Ukraine, and that gentleman needs to focus on his mission, protecting his individuals, right, leading those guys into battle. So that's where the chaplains step in. Uh, I love the thing about the church in Ukraine is everybody knows each other and we're all connected, right? After a few phone calls, his roof was fixed and he had a proper dishwasher. That way he can focus on his mission. And that's really something practical, but that's also another way that we encourage each other as we take care of each other.
No, that's great. I mean, I never would have thought of that. So you go and you fix a dishwasher
Yeah.
and do really practical things to help keep the family together. And and that's got to take at least some weight off of the minds of that commander or whoever it is you're helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not per se me physically fixing dishwasher is, through our network, we'll make a call to somebody, other part of Ukraine, and say, hey, we have a situation here. This gentleman has a leaky roof. Car doesn't work right. His wife needs help. Kids need help. And the churches, they take care of that, right? And that's really what I like about the body of Christ. It falls back to practicality.
Yeah. And you get someone who actually knows how to fix the dishwasher.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what interaction do you have with civilians, if any? There must be some.
Steve, we have a lot of interaction with civilians. Chaplains, we don't serve soldiers only, we serve civilians too because they are hurting just as much, if not more. They are suffering tremendously. After this podcast, I'll send you some pictures. I'm going to tell you a very, very interesting story that we had in the Zaporizhia region. We came upon this house that was bombed just shortly before we got there. The gentleman's name was Anatoly, and he had a dog, a German Shepherd, that was heavily wounded in the attack. And we had a chat with the individual. This was about probably 5 miles from the front, 7-9 kilometers. And this gentleman's house was just wiped out. Unfortunately, he came out, all scratched up. His dog's injured. And next morning, we thought to ourselves, you know what, we have to go back and let's try to evacuate him for one, or let's try to help him, right? Mm-hmm. So when we got there, that's the place where we almost lost our lives. A Russian drone was waiting for us, unfortunately, and our jammer saved us and saved the guys coming in after us. The Russian suicide drone went for a second attack and fell about, I'd say, 30 feet away from me. Our jammer protected us, protected the guys next to us. But that's what we do, right? We also take care of civilians. One of the things we did on this trip is we met an elderly lady. Her name was Valentina. And Steve, what she does is she takes care of stray dogs and cats in the neighborhood, in these abandoned villages, right? I mean, so she's got dozens and dozens of these animals. And we as chaplains will bring food to her, right, for the animals, wet food and dry food, cats, dogs. It sounds kind of childish, but that's how we take care of civilians too.
That's wonderful. What's your hope for the future? What do you hope happens here in the next, let's say, the next year?
Steve, obviously we all want peace, and we all want victory. And I say that because nobody wants peace as much as the Ukrainian people do, but they want just peace, right? And they don't want this war to be paused, frozen, and that will give the Russians the ability to regroup, reassess, rearm, and restrike again. So I still have this hope and a feeling and a faith that God will step in a miraculous way for the nation of Ukraine. I'll kind of little history here. Ukraine was given a few days, few weeks to survive when the full-scale invasion happened. After 3 or 4 years of full-scale combat, Russia does occupy a little under 20% of Ukraine with Crimea, but the Russian military has been severely degraded. They're using Iranian, Chinese, North Korean help now just to stay afloat and to slowly creep forward, right? So my hope is that God steps in and that the invaders run back. I don't want to see any more Russian soldiers dead. I don't. I don't take joy in seeing them die by the hundreds, right? But also understand that these guys came to kill, and the people of Ukraine are defending their home. So I'm praying that God steps in and that something miraculous happens where in the end it'll be God that gets the glory, not mankind, but God. And I know He's got His ways of doing that.
That leads me to this thought. It hadn't occurred to me. Have you had any interaction with Russian soldiers?
I personally have never spoken to a Russian soldier in his area of combat, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
They do fall into hospitals once in a while, right? Where I've been in hospitals, Steve, where our guys in floor number 1 or floor number 2, right? Our guys, and a floor above them, the Russians are there. Wounded Russian captured soldiers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they're getting treatment just like our guys are, because that's the right way to do. That's Geneva Conventions for you. So, but outside of hospitals, as far as in a theater of combat, no.
Right.
I
Right.
pray I
Sure.
never do.
Right. Yeah. In that context, that wouldn't be a good thing. You had mentioned that the last time we talked that that it was a priority to make sure that anybody who's captured is treated humanely, and it
Yeah.
sounds like that's still going on, which
You know,
I think
Steve.
that's good. It's I'm sure it's hard because there's so much devastation and there's so much emotion involved, and yeah, I can see where that would be hard, but it's the right thing.
Steve, one of the, I think one of the very, very important aspects of a chaplain is we bring light to a very, very dark place, right? And we tell our soldiers this, at least I do, and I know other chaplains do. If you have an ability to take a Russian soldier as a POW, do so. Try to save his life. Don't hurt him, don't kill him, right, if you can. And if you do capture him, know that this is an armed individual at this point, and treat him with dignity. As hard as that is after all the barbaric stuff the Russians do. Now, on the flip side, I'm sure you've seen the Russian military regularly executes our soldiers, unarmed guys, unfortunately. And that really falls back on the mentality of the liberator versus the oppressor, right? People that are liberating their home, Steve, they are doing this primarily out of love for their children, right? It's a sacrifice. When you're oppressing somebody, you look at that individual you're oppressing not as a human being, but as a source of something that needs to be conquered. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a very different mentality. So, that really goes as a testament to the work of the chaplains. Is we still provide that human life aspect on the front. We bring light to a very, very dark place, and I think that's a very important thing.
It is. It definitely is. You had mentioned when we were talking about doing this second interview that this was possibly the most dangerous trip that you've been on over to Ukraine. First of all, how long have you been back, and then why was it maybe the most dangerous?
Yeah, great question. So my trip ranged from the 3rd of April to the 19th of April, a little over 2 weeks. I've done many, many trips to the front lines, hundreds of missions, and I'll tell you a scenario where that was a miracle of God that our team walked away unhurt. I told you that story about that gentleman Anatoly who had his house destroyed with the wounded dog. We made a decision to drive to him to the front, and with the hopes of evacuating him, give him that option. And we brought him some food, some material, and some food for his animal also. We got there, we parked across the street from him, and I was the first one to exit the vehicle. I was in the front seat, passenger side. And the moment I exited that vehicle, I immediately heard a Russian drone dive bombing for our vehicle. It's this, kind of like a chainsaw sound, right? And then I looked up, and that drone pulled up. Our jammer, we believed, jammed that drone right at lost communication. So the way those things are made is if they want to regain comms, they need to pull up to get out of our area of coverage, right? And we walked out, all three of us, and this thing was circling us, right? Circling us, and you can hear it. It's loud. It carries a small explosive on it. And then there were guys that were driving on the same road a little bit after us, and we saw how that drone dove for that vehicle. That vehicle had no jammer on it. We did have a jammer. That's what saved us. And when those guys got close to us, as that drone was diving for that vehicle, that suicide drone, we believe that our jammer covered that area of that vehicle. Does that make sense? And that drone fell right in front of that vehicle, about, I'd say, 10 meters from me, exploded, and that was, I would say, the closest I've ever come, because I know that on the other end, 10, 15 kilometers, miles away, there was a Russian soldier with with the headset that was looking at a live screen, trying to paint our vehicle and paint the other guys' vehicles. And you know what that really falls on? That falls on this. For one, that was an act of God. I thank God for His mercy that could have been over for us. But also, chaplaincy, Steve, it's a ministry of presence. Our presence at that location could have very, very well possibly saved the other soldier's life. Does that make sense? Our jammer being on our vehicle saved the guys behind us.
So I'm curious about that. Should the jammer have, like normally the way they work, should it have covered that other vehicle, or is that something that is more miraculous in the sense that it did more than it was designed to do?
Well, so jammers, they look at it this way. They basically make this envelope of coverage around the vehicle. Does that make sense? And they don't work all the time. These drones, they find different wavelengths, different bandwidth, and if they have, some drones are using fiber optic lines, which are 30 kilometers long. They're very, very long lines, and you cannot jam those. This was not that type of a drone. This was a drone that was flying basically by wavelength, by radio signal, quote unquote. And our jammer protected us. And as the other vehicle got close to us, right, and the Russian drone made that dive for that vehicle on the second pass, our jammer covered that vehicle. Does that make sense? Because that vehicle did not have a jammer on them. And that really, Steve, is, like I said before, that's the chaplaincy. A lot of times it's just a ministry of presence, being there, right? Being next to somebody. And I do believe that was God using our vehicle not only to protect us, but to also protect the other soldiers as well.
So does that give you pause about wanting to go back, having come that close?
Yeah, this trip we had a couple of close calls, and that really falls back on how the war has evolved into me to be more of a almost AI, artificial intelligence, the introduction of mass use of, cheap suicide drones. Look, we all have children. We all have families back home. Every one of us in that cab had children. Every one of us. But that, of course, we absolutely experience fear. I experience fear every time in Ukraine. I would lie to you if I said I'm not afraid. I'm very afraid at times, but that doesn't freeze us from doing what's right. That makes us more determined, and we plan our missions, and we try to act with common sense, and we're very careful.
Yeah. Will you go back?
Yeah, Steve, I will go back. I'm planning to do another trip here this year,
Okay.
in a few months. And I really want to go back for victory. It's just heartbreaking to see what's been happening over there. But those things, they don't put a stop on us. We have to serve. It's my calling. It's my ministry. And for me, sometimes, Steve, this really isn't just about helping Ukraine just because I was born there. I mean, gosh, I grew up in America. I'm an American citizen. For me, this is about defending freedom, right? Freedom and democracy, they are not self-sustaining organisms. It's something that you need to elect again, again, and again, and you need to protect it and defend it, whether it's home or abroad. It's one of those organisms that will die by itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You need to protect it and defend it. So yeah, I will go back.
What does Ukraine need to be able to end this the way they want to end it?
Well, so the war is still very, very much winnable. One of the things I would like the Trump administration to do is, for one, they need to realize who they're dealing with. This is a war criminal, and one of the ways that the Soviet Union fell apart was through mass and heavy use of sanctions in its energy sector. Russia needs to be sanctioned heavily, the government does, and the people of Ukraine need to be given the weaponry that they need to fully prosecute this war as they see fit. And but I have this feeling that this war will end in a miraculous way of God's hand coming into play. The people of Ukraine are extremely thankful to everybody, especially the states, the folks here in America, the politicians from both chambers of the aisle, for their help, for their aid. But the people in Ukraine, they're defending their home, they're defending their children, and when I see bodies of children and women scattered on the streets, and then I hear things back home. Well, Mr. Putin really wants peace. A guy that wants peace would never ever put a ballistic missile on Palm Sunday near a church. Those are war crimes.
How can people pray for you and for Ukraine?
Well, thank you for that. For one, pray for our safety. Pray that God will give strength and the wisdom to the Ukrainian leadership, to President Zelensky, to its forces, and also pray that God will open up the eyes of the Western leaders and make their hand strong and not weak, that they will be resolute. I kind of coined this term. I'm praying that we have a president or leader here in the West that has the foreign policy resoluteness of Ronald Reagan and the compassion and empathy of Jimmy Carter. Does that make sense? I think those are.
I love that.
I think those are.
Yes.
I think those are very important things. President needs to have the ability to lead, and he also needs to have the ability to love and show empathy. And I've been reading this book on the life of Jimmy Carter, and the more I read a book on him, the more I respect the guy. Sure. He was a true servant. So pray for the people of Ukraine. Pray for leaders here and back in Ukraine that God will give them strength and wisdom to lead. And before I forget, I also, with regards to praying for Ukraine, one of my good friends I went to Ukraine with this time, his name was Carl Algren. That's his name. This individual has worked, in America's politics for a long time, being a chief of staff of various members of Congress, of Senate, and he went with me to this trip, and he does an incredible job of Ukraine, kind of speaking the truth about the persecuted church and getting that out here in the Western world. He and some other folks made this incredible film, Steve. It's called Faith Under Siege. Faith Under Siege. And it's a film about the persecution and the perseverance of the Ukrainian church at the hands of the Russian occupiers. In fact, that film was shown yesterday at the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., and it'll be shown across small theaters in the country and across churches here in the country, and I'll send you a link to it. Maybe you can post it and you can watch it yourself. It's a fantastic film that really focuses on the perseverance and the persecution of the Ukrainian church, and how the church is more than just a building. It focuses on life stories, some incredibly sad stories, but it's a very, very powerful film, and I think you'll come away from that film more educated, and you'll understand some things a lot more.
Yeah, so that's people can stream it from the link.
Absolutely, yes. Faith Under Siege. I'll send the link to you. It's and I'm hoping that local churches will pick up and have little viewing segments, watch parties, quote unquote, and yeah, Faith Under Siege, an incredible film. It will not leave you tearless.
We'll find that in the show notes for sure. Is there anything else that we should talk about that I haven't thought of today?
Steve, I think this is a very, very good conversation. Mainly want to pass on my thanks to the American people, to, like I said, the politicians from both chambers of the aisle. There's a lot of good people in American politics. They're not Twitter stars, quote unquote, right? They're just working. And I pray that God blesses them, God rewards them, and that God also rewards America for its kind heart and its beautiful people. I pray that a giving hand will not wither, right? That God will reward this nation still mightily. Just pray for Ukraine that God will end this war so the people of Ukraine have just peace. That this horrific act of genocide will never happen, and that those that have committed such things, that they are, that they're held responsible. And also, pray for the children of Ukraine. That's going to be another battle we're going to fight after this war is over, to get the children back, right? I mean, at least 20,000 children have been abducted, given new passports, new last names, taken from their parents. And the Russians are saying that we actually took, I'll read right here, Russian authorities have claimed that over 700,000 Ukrainian children have been evacuated, quote unquote, by mid-2023. From occupied areas, they're taking children out of Ukraine in the name of safety, right? These are war crimes per Geneva Conventions. You cannot move children across state lines during a time of armed conflict. So we can't forget about them too. Think about the parents, right, that lost their children. Yeah. It's horrific.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Mikhail, thank you for sharing your story again with us and for what you're doing. Very courageous work, answering God's call to go help, to basically to love your neighbor when it's very dangerous to love your neighbor in the way that you do. So that's very inspiring, and I hope that, maybe there's somebody listening to this who senses God's call to do something that is outside their comfort zone, and maybe your story will help give them what they need to step forward into that, whatever it is. It could be any number of things. But we will be praying for you and for Ukraine, and that this mess ends soon with Ukraine keeping its sovereignty.
Amen. Steve, once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity and the platform to share my story. Honored to be with you, and I wish you and the team nothing but the best, good health, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again, sir.
Thank you for listening to Shaken. If you know someone who's asking questions like, why did God allow this to happen? Is God angry at me? What do I make of my suffering? Would you please share Shaken with them? You can help more people find Shaken by liking and subscribing and reviewing this podcast. You can find more episodes at purposely.com or wherever you get podcasts.
Are you looking for a distinctly Christian education? A place where your child can be challenged with academic rigor through a biblical worldview? Consider King's Schools.
Hi, my name is Michaela, and I'm a proud student of King's Schools graduating class of 2025. Being a King's Knight has made a significant impact on my faith and future. Next year, I will be studying at Northwest University in their honors program. Because of King's Schools, I grew so much in my faith and my relationship with God. If you're considering enrolling at King's Schools next year, my advice would be to go for it. The community and environment here were amazing for me, and I love it here. And you will too.
Sign up for a tour of King's Schools by June 30th, and if you enroll, mention Purposely and pay no application fee. Visit gokings.org for more. Building resilient disciples of Christ through Christian education for 75 years. gokings.org.